the power of controlling your narrative. Everyone's got a story that they're trying to tell, and they're trying to tell that in the most efficient way. I truly don't believe corporate is about hard work. It's just about making sure the right people are hearing the message. I was on paternity leave when they placed me on that PIP, and there was no HR involvement or anything. And the guy who did it, he had gone off to another job, so that was like his parting gift. In corporate, someone will smile with you, but you're always like, you could turn on me. At that point, I wasn't even really like searching for clients, but I was more trying to search for opportunities to do like some free work, to just learn what it felt like, to see if I even wanted to make this jump or not. So I just offered a free workshop. That's pretty much where the journey kicked off. So I spent like a good year and a half just doing free stuff for people.
For me, like when I look at operations, it's like the thing you can't see, right? In terms of like us as human beings, we can act, we can talk, we can walk, but we don't see the amount of like bodily functions are happening in us on a day-to-day basis every single minute, where, you know, if we get a blood clot in our leg and that travels up to our heart, we can die like that because something's not functioning well. So I kind of think of operations like that way, but also operations itself can be, some people will see it as something which is not sexy as well. But I'd love to get your perspective as the operations guru. Like, what's operations to you, and why do you see it as such an important thing?
I mean, like, I'd say I can tackle it from like 2 or 3 areas. So like, one, I always describe operations as like blood. So blood will travel through the body and it will carry the necessary resources from organ to organ. And I think one of the reasons why ops is so elusive to people is because, you know, you see marketing as an organ, right? Like the liver, you see finance as another organ, but what is ops? And you hear words like marketing ops and finance ops and sales ops, because ops is whatever it needs to be to wherever it is. So ops is very fluid, and it's this carrier of information, and it's ensuring that, you know, every organ has the right resources that it needs. And I guess in a more like practical sense, you know, people call operations like the engine room, right? And truthfully, it is. It's the infrastructure, it's the backbone. So it's the kind of like the orchestra between like people, process, and platforms, and ops is that thing that's tying it all together. And if you look at everything that you do in a business, it comes down to who's doing it, how they're doing it, and process, and are they using any like tech or platforms to do it as well. You can add other things like props in terms of, do I need a table, do I need a pen, do I need any like hardware or stuff like that. But those 3 Ps are essentially like the foundation of operations. And if one goes, if you've got great people and you've got good platforms, but you don't have process, something will flop at some point. If you've got great process, great tech stack, but your people like suck, then business is going to fall down. So yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned those 3 Ps, and it's quite interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like processes is one of those things where you kind of delay it until it breaks or until you need to do it. Because especially as you're running the business, a lot of the things that you're doing is like purely off pure intuition. And it's only when you're trying to bring someone else in the business that you decide to like write down what those processes would be. And I think sometimes as well, like when you're starting something, if you have like a strong advantage in one area, let's say people, then it's like that in itself can carry the whole engine for as long as possible until it's not there anymore. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I guess with you and like the people that you work with, like how have you tried to shift their mindset into seeing, say, I guess those 3 Ps are as like all equal in terms of like keeping that engine moving?
Well, I think one thing I've always told people is to draw out the business. Like a lot of people don't do that anymore. But one of the first things I do when I'm working with any client is get on a whiteboard, be it virtual or physical, and draw out the value chain. So like from beginning to the end, like how does the business create the value that it gives to its customers? So for example, typical e-commerce businesses, like first step product sourcing, when you get your products from inbound logistics, how do you get those raw materials into like your warehouse? The operations, how do you turn the input into the output, like your final value? Outbound logistics, how do you now get out to the customer? Marketing and sales, how do you market and sell that value, that product or service? And then customer success, like how do you deliver good customer success around it, right? So it's literally like drawing out that chain of value and saying, okay, what are the key activities here, and here? What are the key skill sets required to do those things? And then literally drawing out, okay, on the this column people, who's the people that does that? Okay, what are the key processes? Okay, what are the key platforms that really help everyone to do that bit at that bit? And oftentimes, like when you draw that out, it's like, oh, they're suddenly seeing their business, like, because the business was always this thing that they were just doing, but it was never drawn out in a model for them. And it's much more easier to begin to see where the lines are not connecting, because you can, like in the police crime movies where they've got the board and then they've got the people's faces and they're putting all the lines here and here just to help them see, like, where's the break, like where's the common thread. And that's what actually everyone should do in their businesses. And in terms of those 3Ps, I definitely am more weighted to the people, because like you can have rubbish processes and a rubbish platform. If you got good people, like you can still go a long way, only at the expense of the people in the long run. So the process and the platforms, even though the props are all there to help the people be great, be the best that they can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that value chain, is there one particular area that you think most people don't think about?
Yeah, so everyone always overemphasizes on the marketing and sales element, right?
Yeah.
And if you think of us as consumers, that's because that's the part of the business that most people have interacted with first. So it's the first bit that they understand. And something I've always said is operations, well, your operating budget, what's the word? How do I say this again? Operations accounts for like 60% of the budget within your business, right? So like just fulfillment, logistics, that's 30% already. And then the other 30%, which goes to like marketing and sales, like is still heavily influenced by operations. So people will spend 80% of their time on marketing and 10% of the time on the thing that actually affects 60% of the business. That's actually what I was trying to say. So people overemphasize on that. They get good at it. The engine's there and they start to bring in, all the new customers and all the leads. But because the back end is not sorted out, people are having a bad experience with the business now. Things are going out late, or there's mixed messages, or the systems are not speaking to each other properly. So your staff on the back end are feeling the pain as well. So even things like maybe overproducing inventory. So now kind of all your revenues tied up in there. Now, as a founder, is like maybe you might be stressed out and your teams might be stressed out because like you're not hitting the targets, because now you've got like even more pressure to do it. Or more so, maybe you haven't understood the link between all your different platforms. You go in the back, you change something that doesn't feed through to like maybe your fulfillment center or something. Customers are no longer getting the orders. Your customer service team is now backed up with people complaining. And now you're spending all your energy like firefighting rather than making like really great strategic decisions, all because you kind of over-indexed on one bit and you didn't understand the impacts on the other bits. So
that resonates with me a lot, because with Herbie, like when we were doing so much of it, like even especially in the early days, where because we were manufacturing the product, we were shipping the product ourselves, doing the marketing, doing the sales, and we're just like a 2-person team. So we didn't have anything outsourced, and so that in itself was hard, because it's like you're trying to run so many different businesses, and like when you're focused on purely the operation side of things, then you're looking just like one step ahead rather than like 5 or 10 steps ahead. And even then, like as someone who's come from a corporate background, it's like it's very easy to only look one step ahead, if that makes sense, because it's less risky. And like because you're doing stuff which is less risky, and therefore it can feel like it's less value add to the business. Because me and Paul always get into these debates, right, in terms of like, should you spend most of your time on, say, operations, the things that can't be seen, or focus most of your time on sales, the things that can be seen, in order, like, if you make enough money, then you can reinvest that back into the business and make sure the operations engine can run? Or like, do you get to a point whereby you keep growing, and then when you feel the operations break, or maybe it does break, and then that's when you invest in it, right? So like, is there a sweet spot in terms of when you see your clients, or when they should start looking at the operations, or is it something they should do from earlier?
Yeah, I get you. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people do wait till something breaks, and that's not the right environment, because it's like, why would you wait to look after yourself, like till the point in which you break your arm, right? That might be a reality check, but it didn't have to get there. And I think, not that I'm a big football fan, but like I enjoy watching it. But if you think about it, you have like revenue generators, you have revenue enablers, profit enablers, revenue protectors and stuff, and like different roles play different different functions play different roles. So maybe your customer service is like a revenue protector, like because they're delivering that kind of like good experience to keep customers coming back. And then, you know, marketing and sales are like, you know, strong revenue generators. And operations is like a revenue enabler, but also a profit enabler as well. So when we're asking what's more important, if you're saying, well, we're going to put all our eggs in the basket of revenue generation, but we haven't really got anything protecting that revenue, we haven't got anything enabling it, and we haven't got anything really protecting our profit as well, you often start to see the gap. So it's just about the balance. At the beginning, naturally, 20% operations, just enough to like have some form of structure, and then 80% like marketing, because you got to get the word out there. But the more you start to validate that you have that engine, you need to start like evening it out as well, because you're ignoring something that on its very, very core basis is 30% of the cost of your business. And like I said, impacts the other 30%, which is the marketing and sales. So the minute you start to confirm your marketing engine, that's the point at which you start ramping up operations, because that's going to support the growth sustainably of your marketing efforts. Because oftentimes is, okay, you see with people that go viral, like before they were ready, suddenly you get like 1 million people trying to buy it. You can't handle it. It actually breaks the business, kills off everything, and nobody gives you that next chance anyway. So actually, the minute the marketing started to work, the operation should have been like supporting it.
It reminds me of the pink sauce. Do you remember that story?
What's that one? No.
Yeah, the pink sauce. So this white lady in America, so she had this pink sauce and like went viral, like went all over the place, and like people were buying it, but then obviously people orders were coming late. But also the pink was different types of pink.
Oh yeah.
As in that goes down to like the customer quality and like what you're actually getting. Because that's the thing, is like what I've learned as well. Sometimes if you are being delayed, like if you do go through like a random splurge in sales, and even if you can't meet the demand within the time frame that you need to, if you communicate that, customers are very forgiving. It's when you just ghost on them and not say anything, then that's when the problem lies. And so there's that little grace, especially as a small business, you have to give yourself that, like people will give you a blight as long as you can make it up to them, which is quite key. And like I was going to say, because you've also spoke about like the difference between having a business which is, say, investable and profitable. So like talk to me a little bit about that framework.
The only thing, I think the mindset towards that is changing these days anyway. Like we've seen all tech layoffs, because all these businesses that were not actually based on, you know, this thing called profit like and efficiency, but were based on like cheap money, i.e. like invested money, suddenly, like, you know, VC purse strings start tightening, the revenue, well, cash flow isn't coming to the business, and suddenly those businesses are breaking down. So it shows that they weren't running on sustainable models anyway. But at that point, they were investable businesses, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, an investable business is a business with a track record, a business that can show capital efficiency and stuff. So the definition or the goalposts have now changed as to what is, I think there's now much more closeness between a good, like, steady business and an investable business as well. So I'd say, like, right now, everyone should be able to demonstrate that they're not using a growth at all costs strategy, but they're actually found like a real scalable, efficient way to grow that will not kill the business in the long term anyway. So yeah.
Because how would you go into a company and help them find that then? Like, what would be the thing that you'd
To find efficiencies.
find efficiencies? Like, what would be the first thing, like day one you walk in there?
So start with the value chain, naturally. Actually, before that, I just say, where's your headaches right now? Like, what's top of mind for you right now? And then you can pretty much start from there, map out the value chain, and start to see who does this, okay, what's the ideal output of this role, like in a perfect world? And then you're able to see the difference between point A and point B, and be like, okay, that's not happening because you don't even have like a platform here. Or actually, you have a platform here, but it's not linked to there. That's why that information isn't feeding through. So it all starts from that drawing, and then if those dots are not connecting, you know, to drill down in there as well. Then obviously you got like things like, are you creating a waste by like duplicated efforts, like wasted movement, overproduction, like all of that stuff, which kind of gets into like, you know, lean management, all that stuff. But that's like, old school like manufacturing
Just in
stuff.
time,
Yeah,
yeah.
just in time, like FIFO and all that. But truly, it all starts from, it's very like visual. Like you will see it yourself if you draw out your business and realize, oh, I don't have that. Or sometimes you don't have the data to back why a certain decision was made. And then when you actually go back into the data, you'll see that the data was saying the complete opposite, but by that point it's too late. So it's now trying to reverse that issue and get you back to a point where you can start growing properly as well. But it literally all starts from mapping it out at the beginning and going through that visual journey.
Got it. Yeah, I like that because when you say value chain, it's something that I haven't like since uni. Do you know what I mean? Like I can still remember studying like can't remember. I think they ops management. I can't even remember now. But it's weird, like some of these concepts where you learn them, but you don't realize that you actually can put it into practice in real life. Because even something like say strategy, and like strategy is always, I've always felt like it's such a broad term. Like it talks about like you have the different options on the table, but then some people use strategy as like a plan, but those two are not the same thing. Strategy and plan is not the same. I'd love for you to just explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So as you said, like plans are not strategies and strategies are not plans. Literally, like strategy is just choice, man. Like if you had to really like dumb it down, it's just choices. What choice am I gonna make given I know where I'm trying to go in terms of I've got my targets, I've got my objectives which tell me I'm on track to those targets. What do I know about myself, like you know, as a boxer, like do I feel in shape or do I feel a bit gas from a run? What does the terrain look like the market that you're going to be operating in? So you're basically getting all these inputs like from your surrounding, like macro environments, whatever you want to call it, and you're making a choice. You know, oftentimes, especially in business, like I like to use something called the strategy diamond, and it's basically looking at choice from like 5 different elements. So like, what arenas am I going to play in? What's my sequencing, like my staging, like what steps am I gonna make and when? What makes me different? What's the economic logic? And off the top of my head, I can't remember the other one, but what is the other one? I can't remember it. But basically, across those 5 elements, like I'm gonna say, what choice am I gonna make there? What choice am I gonna make there? What choice am I gonna make there? And that's my strategy, like literally. And choices change depending on the inputs you're getting from different parts of like the business or the environment. So strategy is just choice, literally. To make it simple.
And then did you have a strategy like each year or every 5 years, would you say?
Before, when I was more corporate, I was like, yeah, 5 years, man. Nah, now I'm like a year. A year. And then maybe when you get to like maybe 6 months within it, you start to like push out another 6 months. I think have something loose, like for the sake, if someone asks you like, oh, in 5 years, I want to be like, but just keep it that high. But you should always be able to like detail what you're going to do in this year.
Yeah. Talking of corporate and strategy, so like, obviously you've been doing, how long you been doing this for now? 2 years, 3 years?
My business?
Yeah, TRI.
Literally, just a year and a month.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So year and a half, yeah. Year and a month. So like, your journey into doing this, like setting up your own consultancy business, was going into like strategy, consulting, something that you always wanted to do from like an early age, or was it something that you just kind of fell into?
Yeah, I fell into it, man. So I went to Ernst & Young and Deloitte and like CAP, so the quote unquote big boys, right? But I never even knew I had applied to Ernst & Young. I didn't even know what it was.
What do you mean?
I didn't know what it was. I was EY. Like, I just knew it was all Canary Wharf. Oh, that's where all like the black boys in the nice suits get off. I was like, all right, cool. I'll do that, because I was in a boutique healthcare consultancy at the time, and I was like my first kind of like, you know, venture into this whole thing of like management consultants and stuff. So I had no idea like what this industry was, but I just wasn't really enjoying my time there. I just felt limited. So I literally just like, you know, when you just apply to everything, and then EY got back to me, and then I just went for the interviews, and you know, that's a whole story in itself, but like eventually ended up in EY. So
What happened?
what did
firstly, why did you feel limited in a boutique consultancy, and then what happened with EY?
Like without exposing too much, let's just say they had some very weird practices that weren't necessarily sustainable, and even in terms of career progression. Like, you just couldn't really see it, or it was going to happen. It was going to come at the cost of, a big portion of your life. So I was just like, nah, that's not me. And plus, because I was always traveling so much, it wasn't as easy to just apply for it. Apply for a job and go for an interview, because maybe I'm in Scotland and I'm applying for something in London. So I actually made the choice to leave, like, even without having anything secured at that point. So when I applied to EY, like, I got to the first stage, cool, second stage, I think cool, third stage, cool, then they just like kind of like ghosted me, and I was like, what's going on here? And to this day, I don't really know what happened. But then after I saw the job come back up, and I just called the recruiter, I said, I'm not going through first and second stage. Like, I already went to the final stage, like, put me back there, then I did it, and then got it the second time round. So I was just thanking God that I could persevere through that. But it taught me about conversations that happen, like, behind the scenes, because I remember there was a black guy, his name was Desmond, and I met him after that in EY, and he was just telling me, like, the dumb stuff like that they were deliberating over, and he was just like, bro, like, why does this matter to you? Like, so yeah, it started introducing me into like this whole world of like narratives and storytelling, and most of corporate, right? I didn't learn operations from these giants as much as the story would want to go that way. But what I did learn was simply the power of controlling your narrative, because that's literally all corporate is. Like, everyone's got a story that they're trying to tell, and they're trying to tell that in the most efficient way possible. I truly don't believe corporate is about hard work. It's just about making sure the right people are hearing the message. And then, so that taught me about that. And then obviously I took that here, and I'm still trying to work on the branding, but so far it seems to be working-ish.
Yeah, I mean, it's working. There's so many parts of that story I want to pick up on, because, like, it's the fact that you put yourself out there and decided to say, you know, I'm going to quit this job and then apply for EY, because if you're still traveling up and down, and if EY ghosted you, you probably wouldn't have followed up as well. And it's the fact that you had the audacity to call them the third time, because not many people will do it. Like, some people will be like, you know what, I didn't get the first time, I'm not going to even bother the next time. So what was like telling you that I'm going to actually speak to these people and get this job? Did you have something that was just telling you? What was it?
Yeah, no, it was great. It was the grace of God, man. Because obviously I was just praying at that time, and I think I had recently proposed to obviously my wife now. I was just like, God, man, I know you're going to take me through this. Let me just like have that faith and trust in you that it will go through. And I've always believed, like, when you take certain steps in life, whether you're about to get married or you get married, or like your kid's on the way, like, more grace opens. So you just make very bold steps in that time, and you just commit all, everything to him. And like how long has it been? Like 7 years? I don't know. Like, here I am, but all because I was brave enough to take that step back then. And I was like, I'll be with you, and I trusted that, and I just went through with him. So yeah, it was that.
Yeah, I love that. It's like control your narrative and be brave. And so your experience in EY, like, how is that different from where you were previously?
So EY was obviously like more corporate, right? Like, I was in a boutique consultancy, so I was like 20 people at max. Then you get thrown into a building and it's like 4,000 people there. And, it's very matrix structure where you have different partners. So you don't just have a core manager that you work with all the time. Actually, no, EY, I came in as an operations excellence controller, which wasn't consulting. It was just like core ops. So I did have one line manager. But what I learned was just how big that landscape was, and I started learning about partners and directors and like consulting versus like non-consulting routes. So it was really like getting me into it. Then the second role was like sales operations, kind of. That's where I really learned about corporate bullying, like deeply. But that's also where I learned about why, if anyone is going into corporate, one of the first things you do is you find sponsors, like people that are quite like high up that can speak for you, because like so many conversations happen in rooms you didn't even know existed. And you get impacted by it, but you can't influence it, so you need someone who can speak. And then the third role in EY was me finally kind of getting into consulting and learning like client interactions. And even in consulting, a lot of people don't know this, but when you get into consulting, you have to make CVs all over again. So you've got an internal CV, and you have to, prove to the engagement manager why you're the right one to come onto the engagement, and you have to like sell yourself like over and over. If not, you better have like someone that just loves you, so that if they got a project, they're like, yeah, I'm bringing Rohan on. Like Rohan's my guy. Like, so that networking thing is still very much there at that level as well, and it taught me to just keep telling your story in the best possible way. Otherwise, like, you can't control that narrative, so you just end up on a project that you just hate. Yeah.
Where do I want to go with this? Do I want to talk about the corporate bullying? Because I feel like, you know,
Oh my days. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, what I will say, is it was, I learned about the PIP, right? Performance Improvement Plan.
Yeah.
And how would I even start with this? Like, to keep it high level, I remember there was one time, and a lot of the black, the black community or friends, like, we just sat together and we were like, what, you're on one too? It's like, yeah, what, you too? What, huh? Oh, you too? And then
No way.
we were like, okay, like, something's going on here. Bear in mind, and I don't know, I've always reserved this story for like when it'll be right, but I remember I was on paternity leave when they placed me on that PIP, and there was no HR involvement or anything. And the guy who did it, i.e. my bully, he had gone off to another job, so that was like his parting gift
No way.
for me. And I remember that, I was like, okay, God, cool. But the reason I thank God that whole experience happened, even though it was very stressful and saddening, because it really taught me about protecting yourself. And sometimes to this day, not that I have a distrust, but in corporate, you always think like someone will smile with you, but you're always like, you could turn on me. Like, and I still carry that, but I think I'm more healthy with it now. So I think, what it taught me was, sorry, let me go back, because I'm remembering things now. If I rewind, like, God bless a guy called like Andrew Oye, I think that's his name. I remember like when that whole kind of like bullying thing was happening, and because I'm not like in rugby leagues, like, I don't like I'm not white, so there's certain groups I couldn't be in. I wasn't like the partner's pet and all that stuff, so there was no, I remember like feeling like alone a lot, like in that, but everyone's so busy doing their own thing, right? And I remember this, so we're having this kind of like meal amongst like kind of like the black network, because obviously like we gotta stick together. So we just get to talking, and then like someone introduces me to a guy called Andrew, and Andrew's like a senior manager at this time. Bro, this guy just bossing, and he's just like, listen, yeah, like, people get fired for less, like the way you're speaking to him, like, so you need to go and tell this manager guy, he wasn't even a manager, but this line manager, to chill. And from that day, like, truthfully, the guy calmed down.
And she told him, like, relax.
The guy said, you need to relax. That's what I meant about having someone above you that can speak for you.
Yeah.
Which meant that, why did no one else speak for me? Like, the people that were there for me. So that's why you need people that come, like, or not are black as well, but understand your journey and understand the limitations you have, and know where you can't raise your voice or say something. But what I thank God for that whole experience was, obviously, like, when the whole like Black Lives Matter like movement happened because of George Floyd, suddenly like, all these corporates are now listening to us, right? And they make the mistake of putting me on a talk, like, with one of the, I think, the managing partners, and I'm with a few other people, and I tell that story to like all 700 plus people on the call, and suddenly after that, you get people messaging me like, hey, I'm on a PIP too, yeah. It's just like, me too, like, so many people are messaging, and then I was like, is this a thing? And then I think there was this whole thing where it suddenly started getting a bit dangerous, because like people were realizing they had been placed on PIPs like unfairly, and they were getting it turned around. So I thank God, because if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't have gone out and said it, and people would have been fired. Like, and it was weird. Like, you start hearing it from your friends who are in other jobs as well. So I don't know. Sorry to talk about PIPs, but it's always something that I realized that it was a corporate mechanism to begin to get you out.
Yeah.
But the issue is, what happens when it wasn't because of your work, but because of politics?
They don't like you.
They don't like you. Like,
I mean, this is the part of the job that we don't really talk about, because we always talk about like if you're liked and you get a sponsor, then you get promoted up to the ranks. Like you have someone who's advocating for you. If you don't have that, then you're somewhere in the middle of the road. But then there's the other side that you mentioned, like getting managed out. And I think that's a piece where sometimes it can seem quite personal, because what you said about like, if everyone's from a certain like demographic or have certain interests, and I don't like those interests, therefore I'm not going out, then therefore I look like an outsider, even though I'm just being myself, then how can I expect to be accepted? Because they're going to be looking at it like, oh, he doesn't want to be part of the group, therefore he's disengaged, therefore he doesn't want to be here. But in reality, it's like they're not really trying to bring you into the fold, and therefore like your work can go down, especially with morale. And I think with things being more remote, then there's more chance for people to feel disengaged, and potentially more chance for you to be put in a pit without even realizing it. And then you end up just being in a situation that you don't like, you know.
Like a horrible experience. Right?
Yeah.
I think something I've seen, one of the issues with corporate is when it works for you, it works, right? But if you give yourself to it, so you're either like a superstar or you're a scapegoat. Like, and you know, honestly, like people should always be wary. And if you're in corporate, like you know exactly, especially in consulting, you know exactly what I'm talking about, man. Like, if you can be a scapegoat, like anyone can be one. So it's like if you're not protecting yourself and something's going wrong, and that person like who's trying to go for promotion is not trying to have that on the promotion story, they're gonna pass it on to someone else. And if you have no hedge around you, like, you're gonna be the scapegoat. Like,
It sounds ruthless in consultancy like that.
that's the thing. Like, it was so weird. Like, it's like my first few years were lovely. Like, everyone was great. Like, yeah, obviously you get a few things that are a bit annoying, but that's life, innit? But they were cool. And then you start getting more. I think it's any role that is close to sales. Like, so like I was in sales up, so it's like that sales kind of ruthless mindset was there. And in consulting, it's all about promotion, and naturally all promotions are just leading you more into sales anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
So naturally, you gotta make the money, and no one's gonna stop you from making that, and no one's gonna stop you from like having the image that you want. So you're gonna walk over someone to do it, and that's just because it was weird. Like I remember during COVID times, I was speaking to a partner, and this is actually what made me say I don't want to be a partner. He was so scared of coming back home because he wasn't used to being with his family. And that was weird. That was weird to me. Like, bro, like, you make how much here? Because he's always out on the road or he's somewhere else. So it's like, oh, so you're not even part of your family. If you see a lot of partners, kids or whatever, like, you ask them, what's the family relationship? I hardly see them. So it's a weird culture, like the consulting thing. And I think it's for some people, but yeah, for me, like, you know, I prioritized family. I remember like there was another partner, and I remember he was like, "You need to get out of there," because he said like when he started just choosing to be home in the evenings a little bit more, he just lost like half of his pipeline.
Wow.
So obviously, like pipelines where the money's coming from, right? So yeah, consulting it's a weird one, man. Like I think it's a great stepping stone thing, but it can cause you to sacrifice like elements of your life that you don't realize you did that until it's too late. So yeah,
it's a good point, because I feel like you do get to that point where you decide, am I going to take my family more seriously, or am I going to take this work more seriously? And maybe it's in conditioning, and maybe it's like the people around you like make you feel that you have to compete. Do you know what I mean? Like if everyone around you, like your peer group, everyone is like going for it, want to be like partners, and they're not necessarily seeing their family, then that's all you see. So you want to go down that route. But then if you have like other positive role models around you, or other ways where you're able to like look outside the window and see what's going on. And I think even being able to go from company to company, that shows you like levels. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember when I quit Amex, and one of the first things that happened, I got invited to this like CXO event. Have you heard of it before?
No, but I didn't know the whole CXO thing, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I got invited to this event, and it was in, I don't know how they got my email address, but I was like, cool, I'm going to go. So they got me like an Uber Lux, took me from my house in East all the way down to like Leicester Square, had like a 3-course meal with 7 different wines. And then I'm on the table, with like CEOs, CFOs of all these different companies, And I was like, these are just normal people. But like in the company, people are probably shaking just to talk to them. And it just made me just like put that perspective of like, everyone's just normal. Do you know what I mean? And like, you got to find out what works for you and what you truly want to get out of your life. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because some people put on a facade of like trying to be like powerful, but really they're probably like miserable at home. And so, I was just saying like, you just need to find that right balance. And I think for me, that's when like I started realizing that, you know, end of the day, you shouldn't be like you shouldn't give another person so much power over your life. And although we spend so much time at work, like if it's work that you don't truly enjoy, it shouldn't have that much power over your life, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely,
anyway.
man.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's also like it's weird because you know I was at I was at a breakfast panel. I was giving a talk, and then after we kind of just split into like different circles, and I can't remember how the conversation got here, but we were just talking about like, you know, why black people might choose to stay in roles that they're not necessarily enjoying as much. And I remember this guy, like, I don't know where he's from, like he's not like British or something, but like I don't know where he's from. I can't remember where he's from, but we'll call him white for now. He's just like, I don't get why you do that. Like, it's just stupid or something like that. I'm just like, like when you don't come from that environment where it's like it's normal for you to just get a job like that. For the fact there was such a thing of like the black boys at Canary Wharf here meant that it was something that was abnormal.
Yeah.
So even stuff like there is choosing yourself, but then there's also choosing the long term over. So, okay, I'll deal with your crap here for a year.
Yeah.
Build my story, and then jump to another company. So, yeah, some people will just say, I can't do this. Like, I just want to be happy. Great, like whoever's happy for you. But for me, like I was thinking of, okay, I've got a wife. I plan on having kids at that point. Like, what do I need to stick out? How do I need to jump from here to here to here in order to keep building myself up as well? So, yeah, everyone has their different limits, right? But for me, I was definitely choosing like family over this, like personal happiness. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't trying to be partner. So I had like a window of a few years where I was going to try and do as much as I could, and then get out and then go do something that was more fulfilling for me, which is like, you know, unwittingly happened. Yeah. So yeah.
No, I hear that, and I think playing those games, it's like playing games for family or personal enjoyment rather than playing games for status, because some people will be doing jobs literally just for status, just to say that I work here, I work there, and you hate the job, you don't like it, but because you can say that this is what I do, then it gives you that kind of self-esteem. And I think when that happens, then you do have to like kind of reevaluate like where you're deriving your happiness. Again, that's just my opinion. But you mentioned like, so you unwittingly kind of fell into where you are now. So like, what was going through your mind like at the time? So you said to yourself you didn't want to go down the partner route. So like, what were you like? Where was your hunger? Where was your motivation kind of guiding you towards during that time?
I definitely knew I wanted to start a business, right? And I remember at that time, like I wanted to start this app for barbers, right? And then this is when Trim It like was just starting to come up. I was like, but I was still trying, right? I still trying, but I didn't know about starting businesses at that time, so the business just like died before it even took off because I wasn't really falling in love with the problem, like falling in love with the customers. And I also learned it's very, very hard to work with barbers, like very hard. And I'm sure like Darren will say the same thing. And I was really like, although I always wanted to start a business like his, when I saw it, I was like a big user. I was always getting my haircuts like with a Trim It van, and people coming out and seeing that. I was like, yeah, I use Trim It. So at that point I knew, that was like 2018, 2017, I can't remember when. But I knew, oh, you know what? I really want something I can call my own, and I can wake up passionate to do and not dread the Monday anymore. So I just knew I had that, but I didn't know what it was going to be. So I'm just like continuing the corporate journey. And then truthfully, I remember my friend Rotimi, who is the founder of Climber, and I actually think you should get him on this podcast. He does like indoor rock climbing, but he kind of like made it fun for like black people and stuff. So and he's like, you know, he's always featured in like some new article or like with some new brand. But he told me about this podcast called Startup by Gimlet Media. And it's just about this guy who's just holding a microphone and documenting his journey into building his startup, which he later sold to Spotify for like 200 plus mil.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So he's just showing what life is like at a startup. And then I remember like there's a episode based on Backstage Capital with Arlen Hamilton, and he's just following her around. I'm like, but she's a black woman like in this whole VC world, and I'm like, what's VC? And all in this while I'm still obviously doing my corporate journey in the background, but I'm now starting to understand like certain terms. So I go on LinkedIn, type in VC, see everyone that has a title, and basically ask them like, bro, I don't know anything about this industry. Can you talk to me? And through doing that, they tell me about like, I think it was like Diversity I can't remember, Diversity VC. They were doing like a masterclass. So I go on that.
Hold on, before that, yeah. Were you getting offended that because you were black, they were telling you to go to Diversity VC?
No. I didn't know to be offended at that. But the funny thing is, the more I learn about VC, the more I realize, wow, it's not for me. Like, and there's still so many issues of accessibility in there, and even down to the point where I was at an athlete investor summit like a few weeks ago. And I raised that question up again, was like, how do you make this more accessible, right? If it's literally about network, and I'm never gonna know like this person as easy as like other people might. So I started learning about the unfairness of VC, and I started learning about the stress that it puts on businesses. I was like, nah. But then I came across angel investing. So I'm like, I applied for a scholarship for angel investing school, got it, and that's pretty much where the game really changed, because it was more like, you're investing into businesses for the love of the business, right? Like, yes, it will be great to make money, but it's just genuinely because you're interested in the business. And I started to ask myself the question, well, you know, I still ain't got money like that to invest anything meaningful, but I have my skill set. And then it was that mode of questioning that really started to ask me, how can I transfer this to that? Which meant I had to unlearn a lot of what I'd learned in corporate, because obviously those frameworks of business are based on resource, but resource is scarce in startups. But then there's certain elements that are great because, you know, in a startup, everything's just all over the place, and there's no structure guiding you to what that next level of maturity is. And that's where I really started to unlearn like 95% of it, but I kept 5% of it and built around that. And then, like I met my first client in like AIS, and that taught me the value of just networking, and it taught me about like this B2B game is just relationship, and who you know and nurturing over time to the point where it's not a sale anymore, but it's just you've been talking for so long, like just come and do the thing, and it's much easier that way. And yeah, it's still been a big learning point from, you know, a year on to like this point now. Don't know how I got here, but we got here.
No, that's sick. So then the first client that you had, were they like also on the cohort, or were they like a connection?
Yeah, also on the cohort. Which started teaching me is like, I don't know, maybe this thing just didn't work for me, but obviously, you know, you have like cold emailing and stuff. This thing, cold email doesn't work for me, man, because I think with operations, I realized that there was this big education piece that was missing in the market, where no one's really saying to themselves, I've got operational problem, not until it bites them or something breaks. Whereas like with marketing and sales, because everyone's just trying to make more money at that point, so they can tie that to revenue generation, but it's much harder to see why making a better operational decision is going to make you more money. Well, it does make you more money because you save costs and you enable revenue generation anyway. But I found that with cold emails, that wasn't working. But joining small groups, not that AIS is a small group, but joining small groups, joining WhatsApp groups, that's actually like where it's at. And like really building relationships with like channel partners. Like, so like for me, having relationships with anyone in marketing or PR is amazing for me, because a lot of my clients are already speaking to those agencies anyway. And in fact, like Maz, Translate Culture, like was it second or third client came from him, because they're often saying I just need some structure in the business. And he's like, oh yeah, Rohan's gonna give structure. So getting my first client from AIS taught me about the value of building relationships and being in the room, ideally physically, but at least virtually, and having that common ground to speak to someone, because outside of that, someone's always trying to sell.
Someone's ever selling now.
So it kind of removes that weird dance, and it gives you something else to talk about, where eventually they're more open to hearing what you do.
But then what was your mindset? So like, because I feel like your pitch, like let's just say we started this conversation where you explained like pure and simple what operations do and how it's going to save the business. And I think, as you said, some people will see operations as a vitamin. Like, you need it, it's going to make you perform better, but it's not going to hit as well as if it's a painkiller, such as like, oh, I need to make more money quite quickly. So like, with that first client, did you go to them because you were on AIS? So is it an intention to like learn about angel investing? When did the switch kind of trigger to say, actually, I could potentially find my first client in here? And like, how long was that, like, say, that first conversation to like them becoming a client, would you say?
Well, at that point, I wasn't even really like searching for clients, but I was more trying to search for opportunities to do like some free work, to just kind of learn what it felt like, to see if I even wanted to like make this jump or not. So I just offered a free workshop at the time, and then from there, like, built a relationship with them. And then when they were like launching a pop-up, like, obviously they remember that I did operations, and then just brought me on, and then that's pretty much where the journey kicked off. So I spent like a good year and a half just doing free stuff for people. And the funny thing is, like, those people I was doing the free stuff for, it's like, you know, even someone else from when I was doing it has come back and said, by the way, I got an opportunity. And they already know, like, that's my stuff, and they've seen me grow in it. So doing that still paid off, like, in the long run, like a year and a bit after. So, you know, anyone who's trying to do this stuff, like, I know everyone's like, get your money. I'm like, yeah, you could get paid financially, but you can also get paid in knowledge and experience, and that can still take you a long way as well, and can end up paying you like much later down the line, because you got your foot in, you proved your value, and now they've had a taste for it. And if you really do a good job, like, not everyone's gonna stand up to it, and the disparity between the two is gonna be even more like prominent, like, the more they do it. So if you're patient enough, like, just do it for free, man.
I agree, because it's like, just get me in the door. Do you know what I mean? Get me in the door, let me show you what I can do. And even then, it's like, you're not over promising, like, you're just going to show that I know I'm sick at this, so just wait for me, just give me that one shot, I'm going to deliver this, and then you're going to be like telling all of your friends, and then they're going to come and take me, boom 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 boom, and it just grows from there. I think that in itself is just like a sick strategy, especially if you already have a job. So it's like, you're not too dependent on the money. The only thing that's a finite resource is going to be your time. And you just have to like deal with, maybe, like,
firm it.
you got to firm it. Do you know what I'm saying? Especially if it's something that you are passionate about. So then, obviously, you're running the business now for a year. So then, when did you like make the decision to say, okay, I'm going to go and do this full time?
The point before burnout. So I think at the time I was basically working like 3 jobs, like one, my corporate, and then 2 clients at the same time. And you push and you push and you push until the point where like your quality of work is dropping. But then when your main job is getting in the way of this other opportunity, and when you can say, well, I was able to kind of do this with half of my effort, what if I gave it all of my effort at that point? And I think that's the point where you can go and do it. And like Andy IM always says, like, your skill set is your safety net. So I knew I was employable. And some could say I had an unfair advantage, I don't know, but I had like the Big 4 on my CV, so I'm going to milk that wherever I go anyway. So I'm like, all right, cool. If it flops, I can always just go somewhere else and say I'm an ex-Big 4, and then, you know, start the career journey from there again.
But then obviously you're also a family man, right? So you mentioned 3 jobs, but there's a 4th job. So like, how are you managing conversations with like your wife, and then managing even just your own personal like mental health, would you say?
It's, honestly, just communication. And obviously, like, you know, if you marry the right person, they'll be on a journey. Like, they'll be on a journey with you. But yeah, like, she understood, like, that it was gonna be a season of like just tension and roughing it out, but we knew that it's to get to a brighter like future where we're both gonna be happy and enjoying and stuff like that. So yeah, the communication was there, and like yeah, I just thank God for her, man, because if you didn't have that communication, like, you know, there's gonna be one party just feeling very aggravated that, oh come on man, I need help with the kids right now, blah 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 blah. But yeah, man, she stuck it out, and yeah, we're here now. Man.
Yeah, no, it's a good point because some people we don't see it like behind closed doors, isn't it? And I think the what's it called, like, obviously people like relationships to be 50-50, but it's not 50-50 all the time. There's going to be like maybe 90-10.
Yeah.
It will flip-flop like either way. And communication, I think, is number one. But sometimes, especially as men, I feel like it can be difficult to communicate when you are burnt out or when you are feeling stressed, because you would like to see, I mean, I'm talking about myself personally, but like you like to see yourself as I can do everything, right? And like being able to admit that, okay, things are at a breaking point, or even saying to your partner like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity. It might mean less money, but it's going to be for the long-term benefit of our family. I think that in itself was conversations to be had. It's a challenging one because it's like everyone's placing a bet on you, and like taking the risk as a single person compared to a person with a family is like two different kettles of fish. Like, because when you quit, I mean, you had like companies on retainer at that point, right? Yeah, so that you had to build up that kind of safety net, I guess.
Yeah, and it's like, because everyone says, oh yeah, just eat noodles. I'm like, bro, yeah. I literally have 2 kids here. Like, I cannot eat noodles with them. Like, they need to eat properly. So I hear it, but I guess, yeah, the risk factor was more, but then you just ask yourself how much you trust yourself. And in my case, it wasn't actually how much I trusted myself, it was like how much I trusted God. And that really, really took me, and I made like very like big leaps, like with a supportive wife. And I'll say the kids don't know what's going on, but like supportive kids, right? And yeah, and then from there, like it's always been bumpy. Like business is bumpy, man, like as you know. But I'm happy that I did that, because what it also taught me is, you know, like there's gonna be times in business you're like, man, how am I making it to the next month, right?
Yeah.
But because you've now proven to yourself that you've got the ability to just create and make money from it, what that does for your mindset, like, is crazy, because you never actually really get the opportunity to do that in corporate.
No, you don't.
Money's made, like, and you have played a part in it, but to know that you woke up, you did ABC, and you're able to invoice this person or get this from, like, I'm like, okay, so you start to believe in yourself more, and you're like, okay, so I have a friend, and he's got a new homes business, right? Sometimes we just talk to each other and we're like, okay, bro, all right, there's 30 days in a month, right? Okay, cool, you can do a madness in one day. Okay, so that means we've got 30 days to do a madness each day. Okay, we're definitely going to make it by the time we get there. And that mindset to even just say, I'm just going to keep like pushing till something happens, because you know it can. And you know not to look at the environment, but just to keep going anyway. Like, yeah, like I don't even know how I got here as well, but just that mindset, what it does is crazy. But you're only given the privilege of that mindset by first of all taking that jump, like, because you'll never taste it while you still have the safety net of a job.
Yeah, I agree, but also it's the people that you surround yourself with, man.
Exactly.
Because like iron sharpens iron, and I think if you have people around you like that guy, like you said, if he's telling you, look, we could do a madness in 30 days, yeah, and he comes around on day 5 says, yo, I just made 20 bags. You're gonna be like, hey, what's going on? Then you got like the bit of competition going on. It's like, how did you do that? This, that, and the other. And I feel like who you surround yourself with is such an important piece of the puzzle, which is sometimes missed. And I think, like, especially when you go and start a business, you need to be surrounded with people who are on the same journey with you at a similar kind of stage, because if they're too far ahead, it's something to look towards, but it might also be a bit demoralizing. Do you know what I mean? And like, if it's people below you, it's like, how do you know you're pushing yourself? Because you don't want to be the head of the pack, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely not, man. Absolutely not. And I hear it, man. But yeah, as you said, like have someone a bit everywhere, but I'll never even like actively go and build out the people that are below you. for me is anyone who's taking the initiative to be like, hey, I see you doing this. Can I come with you? Because I remember like I don't know why this memory comes to me, but I was coming into church and someone was trying to say like, hey Rohan, but I was busy because I was walking because I'm in the media team, so I'm setting up. And she's like, hey, I'm like, bro, if you want to talk to me, you're gonna have to be following me as I do this thing. But such is the case with the mentorship thing, right?
Yeah.
You can't just, because I'm moving, like, so you need to be able to move with me so that we can speak while I'm moving, because I'm not stopping for you. So anyone who really takes that initiative to be like, hey, like, can I have some advice? And they're walking with me, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you're keeping up pace. So at least you show me that, like, you value the importance of staying, like, with the person you're trying to get to. So, and then after that, like, I'm trying to do that to other people as well. But I'd say that the ones that you should actively build out is the ones on your level as well, while you're, actively build that one out, because everyone's hungry, so eventually one of them will still rise up anyway, so they'll motivate you. But because you're all on the same level, you're still able to like vent to each other and do all of that stuff. And then I don't know, I don't think I've ever actually like really searched for someone way above me. Oh, can you mentor me? Can you do this? Because I don't know, I just haven't really found the value in that. But the ones where I've had really interesting conversations, because like 2 examples, right? One was a lady called Penny, and I really value her input. Like, there's so many people now. Where do I start? Yeah, okay. 3 people. Like Penny, I really valued it because I was just making content on LinkedIn and she liked it. So I just like messaged her, like, oh, thanks for liking it. And she's like, hey, let's talk, man. Like, let me offer you some advice. And that's truly all she's ever done. Like, never asked for anything from that. So would I call her a mentor? I could be like, yeah, I could call her a mentor. But the way the relationship developed, you're just someone that just wants to help, right? I don't have to call it anything, but you're just someone I can call upon. And other people, like someone called Kristen, who's been like that for me as well. A guy called Tristan, he just like vibed me because I said, you know, that whole corporate thing where it's like, I don't know anything about rugby. I was like, bro, I don't know nothing about rugby yet. I'm from Peckham, bro. Like, what do I know about it yet? And he just found that so funny like, that I could say that in public. And because of that, like, he offers his time to me. But other people, the message of like, oh, can you be my mentor? I'm like, no. So I don't know. I don't know where I stand on that whole like finding people above you. But I think when they come naturally, then great. Like, you've got someone that you can call upon to help you out.
Yeah, I mean, what I really admire about your work as well is like you're just like always taking shots. Do you know what I mean? Like, when I was at the D2C event here and you was talking about how you like messaging over 300, 400 people, even the fact that when, so I went to DM you and I saw I had a DM from you. I was like, wait a second. So that just made me bust up. I was thinking, damn, yeah, this guy's active.
I need to go look at. I need to see what I was saying back then, because I need to see what I was saying back then. But that was
no,
funny.
But it was just a simple like, oh, let me get 15 minutes of your time, innit? And like, I don't know what, because me, I'm very scatterbrained, innit? Sometimes, yeah. And so I'm trying to like rein that in. But like, one thing which, like I said, I really admire is just the point of just going out there and just like trying to just network and meet as many people as possible. And I think there's so much value from just having a conversation with people for just 15 minutes. And you don't even know that 15 minutes is like 15 years worth of experience and how it can overlap. Sometimes I overthink. Sometimes I'm like, oh, if I have 15 minutes with this person, that means I need to have a long-term relationship. So I need to have a follow-up, this and the other. And then I just end up putting too much pressure on myself. When in reality, it's just like, have a conversation, have an exchange, and be useful as well. Because even if you may not necessarily have what that person needs, or they might not have what you need, you may have someone else in your networks that just connect the 2 people together. So that's definitely something which I just want to like put into my own repertoire from you, as well as like the groups, the networks, and all that kind of stuff. Because there's so much value in just like doing the thing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Like, it's so funny to hear that, man. Because I always knew that like, I'm gonna meet someone down the line here that I probably sent some weird message back then. but at least it proves that like you've been doing it like, from data. And yeah, I mean, such should be the case for everyone, because like just because they don't like respond as well doesn't mean like they hate you or anything. Like,
Literally that.
everyone's just as busy. I'm pretty sure there's like some messages that I haven't responded to that I'm gonna see in like a few months. I'm like, that's gonna happen to me as well. So I think part of it is also giving people grace in the industry and like, if you want to scale up, like everyone's really pushing, bro. It's not easy. Yes, you've got some value, but like let that value be seen organically, which is why be part of communities and offer your value in communities, and eventually the community is talking about you. You get into the rooms that you've been trying to get to anyway.
No, I agree. And so you mentioned like faith is quite big to you. How do you connect like your faith, the work that you do, and also your purpose?
Yeah, I mean, one is just the knowledge that I'm being led. So how can I be the best like vessel or tool? One thing that I've actively been trying to do over the past few months is introduce myself as Christian first. Like if you go on my LinkedIn, it says Christian. I try and make people see that first about me, because a lot of this business thing is about building your brand. But to keep myself humble, like I'm always almost trying to say I don't have a brand. Like my brand is Christ, and then everything that's good about me, like people have to see it through him. So the faith aspect has always been like the biggest element, because like even if you look at, I guess, like the acceleration of this journey in a year, because bruv, like B2B consulting is really hard. Like it's really hard just to like get that 15 minutes, let alone get someone to invite you into the back end of their business and be that open. So, but you know, a year on, like I was like, okay, like I'm still here, like I'm still building. I've got an employee, and I've got two. So, and it's all because like he's been leading me, and I've just been opening doors. Because oftentimes, you know, when founders do that thing where I'm just gonna work 24 hours, but I truly believe that maybe because I chose to take out an hour and like pray instead, or I chose to like give my time to the church or do this in service of him, that it's like, okay, well, you sacrificed the time you were gonna do that, so I'm gonna accelerate you, like, you know, by weeks or like by months. So it's that partnership with him that it just keeps me sane. And I made the mistake of like focusing on the business more and sacrificing the relationship with him, which is why I learned to put my brand aside. Not because I've been high and mighty, but because I suffered from it, and I was like, I don't ever want to be there again. So the faith aspect is there, and like also like through that I've met like loads of like really great Christian entrepreneurs, and they're everywhere. Like they're everywhere, and I just never realized how big that industry was in itself. So but then it's all about sending signals out there as well. Like if you're not telling people who you are, what your business is, how are they gonna know to even buy it? And it's the same with the faith. So like letting your light shine so other people see and glorify him. So
yeah, love that, man. Thank you, Ryan. So I've got a couple quick fire questions before we wrap up. So first question, what's a piece of advice that you hear people give all the time, but when you hear it, you actually think it's bad advice?
I don't know if I believe this one, but it comes into mind, that whole like follow your passion thing, because you want something to fuel the passion, but sometimes the thing that you're passionate about might not necessarily be the thing that will build the environment for you to do the thing that you are truly passionate about. So i.e., you could be really passionate about, like, I don't know, a business for elephants, just making this up, but you know you have the skill set to have a bounty castle business right now, and that will give you the revenue you need to go do the thing that you're passionate about. And sometimes the over passionate thing can just make you blind to the realism, and when it's time to pivot, be like, no, it's my passion, but no, be objective, man. So yeah,
I like that one. What's one book that you recommend to people the most?
I always tell people about Proverbs, man. Proverbs. Literally, I can go in there, and most of these business books, I will find a proverb in there, and I'll find out. They said that already, and I made a post about like diligence, right? And like most people think it's just about being like very careful, but in Proverbs it was actually about your work being defined by the outcome. So I think the actual Hebrew or Greek word for it meant like as a trench dug or as something cut. So it's like you can only say you were diligent if the outcome happened. If it didn't happen, you weren't diligent enough. So yeah.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can say it didn't happen because it just weren't meant to be happening.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, if you didn't work hard enough, that's why it did happen.
Yeah, and sometimes you can say if you didn't work hard enough, but sometimes what stops the outcome? Was that meant to be the outcome in the first place? And true diligence would have shown, you know, like when Instagram shifted,
Yeah.
they were diligent enough to know that this ain't it, this bourbon thing ain't it, but this bit, this photo bit is it. So they're diligent enough to follow that pathway and came to that outcome. So
it's like paying attention as well.
like being prudent, like paying attention. So yeah.
Like that. What's one word or a piece of encouragement for our listeners?
Be in a room. If you got paid to be in a room, be in a room, because oftentimes your skill set may be great, but you know everyone expects you to be good at what you do anyway. The thing that will really accelerate you is who you know, and if you put as much effort into building out the who you know as opposed to the what am I doing, you often see that even if your product is a bit crappy, you will still be accelerated more than the person who has achieved perfection. So yeah, just fight to be in a room, understand what rooms you need to be in, and pay to be in a room if you can.
Like that. And where can people find you?
Yeah, where can they find me? On LinkedIn, I am trying to like do more on Instagram now. So like LinkedIn, you just type in my name, like Rohan in there, or on Instagram, rohan.i. But what you find when you get there is a different question. But like that's where you can find me.
Okay, brilliant. Rohan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
No problem, man.